Personal Librarian Podcast of the Dallas Public Library. I'm your host, Tanya. And with us tonight, we have our librarian, Brandon. Say hi, Brandon.
Hello.
And we have with us, and we're thrilled to have with us, author Wendy Kaufman Porter. So we're gonna, I'll do a better introduction of her in just a little bit, but we're gonna talk about her book, Aether Ones, which I did ask how to pronounce. So I just want to be clear that that is the correct pronunciation per the author. So, but like we always like to do on this show, we're gonna start out with a little bit of an icebreaker. And I was thinking earlier today, about, what ways that kind of would help someone in the future understand what has happened here. And I thought, you know what, maybe a really good way to explain that would be with book titles. So what if you had to choose one book that would best sort of encapsulate what the year 2020 has been like for future generations, what would that book be?
So I'm assuming you're meaning like from my perspective.
Oh, absolutely. From your perspective.
This is my opinion of this year. I would just like to point that out. This is Fart Proudly by Benjamin Franklin. And if you haven't read this book, it's awesome. But it is a perfect example of basically just how to deal with everything that has gone wrong. I mean, just when life goes upside down and slides backwards down a hill, read Fart Proudly. It will make you feel better about life in general. And that really is kind of my opinion of this year. My husband also has been putting this in his Zoom. That's how I told him. I was like, hey, bring me that book because this has just basically been both of our opinions of this year. It has just been such a fun year.
Yeah,
so much fun.
Fair. How about you, Brandon?
I mean, I guess my opinion of 2020 overall, I guess maybe this is too dark, but I keep thinking of The Stand every time.
Oh,
it's like that, and it's not a book title, but without spoiling anything, season 3 of Westworld on HBO really reminds me of a lot of things that have happened this year as well.
Oh wow!
I haven't made it to season 3. I should probably watch that. I'm in season 2 still.
So is it less controversial than season 2? Because I know a lot of people really didn't like season 2.
That's why I didn't make it all the way through.
It's controversial, but I happen to like where they were going. They renewed it for another season, so COVID, aside, that is going to be pretty interesting to see where they go.
Yeah. Oh, I know, right? It's like all of these shows that got renewals, and it's like, okay, well, that's good. When are we doing that? Where are we doing that?
Yeah, no kidding.
They already renewed. There's several shows that got renewed that are not canceled because of the added cost of trying to produce them.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's terrible. That's terrible. I'm going to be honest. I'm having a really hard time thinking of something other than, and I know this is not purely exact or accurate, but it's what it has felt to me like. And that would be War of the Worlds.
I can see that.
I can see that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really can.
Well, monkey.
Yeah.
It's had been a little more prophetic than I would like it to be, but it's...
Yes, but it's what it's felt like. That's just from my perspective. It's what it's felt like. Felt like get one thing handled and here comes something else. So, which I feel like is what that will be like when that happens someday, maybe. So again, I want to introduce our author for tonight, Wendy Kaufman Porter. Wendy grew up an only child in a military family. So if any of you guys out there grew up in military families, I'm sure you can empathize with all of the moving around that happens. In fact, I was just telling Wendy, my son is about to take his family to Okinawa in the Marines. So it's a thing. You move around a lot. You don't necessarily go to the same schools your whole school career. So you're constantly having to make friends or find friends. And for Wendy, one of the places that was easiest to do for her was in her imagination. So she started writing stories as a very young child, and continued to do so. And then, what do you know? By the time she had her first child, she'd written her first novel. So, welcome, Wendy. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. All that is very, very true. My parents used to hate waiting for the circus that I would insist came into the car with me because I was an only child, and I'd be like, no, I got to get everybody in and get all their seatbelts on before we go anywhere. And my mother's like, oh my God, just get in the car, Yeah, so it's just lovely. But, I think all kids should have some level of imagination. So
Sure. So, and then we have Brandon with us, who is, tell us about your library role, Brandon.
I'm a certified archivist, and I work in the Dallas History and Archives Division of the Dallas Public Library. So we focus on Dallas, and mostly Dallas, but also some Texas history-related archive material, like historic photographs and documentation and things like that, maps.
that sounds fun.
Yeah.
We have the coolest archives, and the 7th floor, unfortunately not available to the public at the moment, but it's so awesome. And I tell people this all the time. My actual first experience with the archives at the library was when, like, my very first job out of college, I worked for a local children's hospital, and they were just in the process of kind of going through all of their old materials, and had just tons and tons and tons of, photographs of the original setup back in the 19 teens, and, this thing and that thing. Anyway, I got to be the person who organized all that and brought it to the archives at the library. So it's
cool.
It's a special place to me, even before I ever worked for the library. So it's really awesome.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That would just be really neat. I love old stuff like that, especially maps. Oh my God, I love old maps. Just love them.
Yeah.
All right.
All
What
right.
do we do?
Brandon, take it away.
Well, I enjoyed your book quite a bit. I read it prior to this interview, and it was very entertaining.
Thank you.
And very fast-paced, and a lot to enjoy there. So I had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask. But first I wanted to see if you wanted to sort of tell us what, a little bit about the book from your perspective.
Yeah. So, I've written a lot of standard fantasy, and experienced a lot of sci-fi and the role playing and stuff like that, and games. But I always felt like there was something missing. So fantasy in of itself, like I said, I'm a real big fan of history. And in my opinion, the way fantasy would evolve into sci-fi kind of fits this book. In this circumstance, in this universe, early on in the history of time, there was the Great Sundering or the Big Bang, depending on which side of the veil you're on, type thing. And the universe gets separated. All planets are copied on both sides. One side, the Eldritch or magic, stays heavily with all of the planets and all of the people. And so your various fantasy races, wizards, stuff like that, all develop to a sci-fi level, full-blown sci-fi level, but on a magical scale, which we call Eldritch, and Aether. That's called the Aether space. And then you have your traditional electromagnetic side, which developed without magic, your standard electricity and spaceships and stuff like that. And so the two have always coexisted, but it's always been a tenuous coexistence. Whenever you have two entirely dramatically different cultures, you will have clash, period. That's all there is to it. That's just the way culture works. And so when the two cultures clash, that they have war, then they have peace, then they have war, then they have peace, and so on and so forth, and back and forth. And in this particular story, we follow one of those agents whose job it is to make sure that the Kaldane space or regular space doesn't really know that the magical space exists. You know, there are quite a few people that know it exists, but for the most part, it's kind of one of those conspiracy theory type things. And so her job is to make sure that, you know, no dragon comes through and starts eating planets, kind of stuff. That's kind of her whole job. And in one circumstance, you know, basically she failed, which gets referenced repeatedly throughout this book, as, you know, they talk about this event that happened that damaged her career, and she's trying to recover from this damaged career event. And so you have a character who is dealing with her own demons and is trying really hard to figure out, you know, how these problems are arising. And then she suddenly realizes murders are happening, and then she starts to notice other trends, and starts down this rabbit hole of mystery until she finds out, you know, that basically her world's about to implode. And so you know, her job is to catch it in time before it gets out of control. And the funny part to me is I wrote this 3 years ago, but yet if you read this book, it kind of fits this last year politically. And I was rereading through it as I was publishing it, and I went, this was a little too accurate. This makes me really uncomfortable. I'm like, people are going to think this book is political when it wasn't when I wrote it. You know, so I was like,
Now that you
whatever.
mentioned, I can see what you mean, but I think that there's enough, you know, sort of humor and perspective that you can kind of see where there's similarities, but that's not the point you're making in the book.
Thankfully, I'm very glad about that. Yeah, that was my biggest concern when all this started going south. I was like, oh my gosh, please don't lump me in with this, because I had nothing to do with this.
You know, I mentioned the humor aspect of it. Like, what is your thought on sort of humor in literature and science fiction? And that's something you really went for. The main character of the book is very funny. She a lot of very sarcastic, you know, always cracking jokes, and really, you know, I enjoyed the banter that she had with a lot of characters in the book. So
that was actually like the fact that you enjoyed that makes me very, very happy, because that was like the whole point. So my husband, you know, he comes from a special operations family. So, you know, I grew up around police officers and military. And so my humor is a little more dark, is what some people call it. Some people call it morbid humor. Some people call it, you know, just various different things. And so I was trying really hard to capture a kind of special operator feel. And special operators, when they're out there and they're doing these horrible things, or these scary things, or these things that the rest of us wouldn't even consider contemplating doing ourselves, they tend to have this really warped sense of humor. And I try to keep that dark humor in all of my books, because life is depressing enough as it is. I don't want my writing, at least, to focus on the depression aspect. You know, this book covers a lot of difficult concepts such as slavery and stuff like that, and I don't want people to be drugged down by that. I want them to think about it, but I want them to stay upbeat and continue on a much more, remember happier things rather than the things that are hard to deal with sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's great. You know, when I read it, I reminded me sort of the buddy cop sort of comedy aspect of a lot of action movies that I grew up watching. I mean, that to me, like, some of the funniest pieces of dialogue I ever heard in a movie were in action movies. So picked up on that a little bit in the book.
You know what? That's really true. I never thought about that, but you're exactly right about that.
Yeah. And for me, like, the darker the action movie, usually the funnier the dialogue.
Yep.
There's a correlation there. So,
Yep.
but going back on what you just said a minute ago, like, what is your main takeaway that you'd like your reader to take from reading the book?
So takeaway,
if you have one.
So I guess I have a couple. My number one takeaway is I want my reader to have read the book and just enjoy it. I don't want at any point my reader to get so frustrated at the book that they chuck it across the room. I've done that. It wasn't fun. I mean, I want my reader to be constantly flipping the page to see what happens next, but to just kind of like enjoy the ride and be able to say at the end of it, wow, that was just fun. Fun is more important to me than anything else. The I do have a few things in there that I also like it when my readers think. I come from a slightly educational background. My degrees in creative writing and philosophy, and so I do have some philosophical points in there that I would really appreciate it if people come to me and say, hey, what about this? But if it gets missed and people are just enjoying the ride, that's even better. So I mean, that for me, the philosophical aspects are completely secondary. I just want the book to be fun more than anything else, because like I said, and this year's a really good example, life is hard enough, and I'm one of those people that I know how hard life can be for people, because I know what it's like to have a really difficult time getting out of the house. I know what it's like, considering, the just going to the grocery store dangerous. And so I don't want people to be worried when they read my book. I want them to just be happy. So it's kind of what I'm going for.
One of the things that I kind of took away from it, reading it, and not without spoiling anything, is there. It seemed like there were you kind of take away a thing where you sort of characters that have had different perspectives and been around in different lengths of time have a common theme of like things are always kind of difficult. They're always having to deal with some sort of strife, but it's never a thing where they're trying to give up. It's always moving forward to try to achieve something, even if it's difficult. And it's a generational thing.
Exactly. That is exactly where I'm going with that. Don't focus on the negative. That doesn't help anybody.
Yes. So, since it's a book about two different universes interacting or trying not to interact, which personally, if you could choose one of them to live in, which one would you prefer?
Oh, wow.
Because I was thinking about that when I read it. Which one would I like more?
Wow, if I had to choose. Okay, here's one. You'll like this one. Book 2. I know that sounds really bad, but I'm gonna say book 2 because the book 2 focuses on a single solar system, whereas the other one focuses on a lot of solar systems where the characters are moving around a lot. In book 2, it's a real heavy focus on a single solar system, and I really, really enjoy this solar system, and I put a lot of effort into it. So, but yeah, I think I would enjoy the aspect of the Leilani character because she can go back and forth. I'm not a, I spend enough time sitting in one spot. I think if I had the choice, I'd go back and forth a lot. So I mean, that's just me.
Fair enough. I mean, and you are the person that created the universe there. So
Yeah.
you like call them.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that on your website you have a lot of role playing material that you've done and created. How much of that impacted your novel writing?
I think it's more of a byproduct of my novel writing, to be honest. One of my players have told me that one of the things they love and hate, if I'm running a game, for example, is that I will tell people to pick a character concept and then I'll develop a world to put them in. And in that process, I like inventing cultures, and I like just developing the way people interact with each other. That's just something I really enjoyed, the whole sociological aspect of it. And so a lot of this side writing and stuff is literally just me writing things down so that I can figure it out in my books. You know, I have an entire separate screen that manages all of my background content and character races and places and stuff like that, just to keep the story straight. And even then, sometimes I'm like, I totally forgot where I was going with this. So, you know, I'm like, I got to remember what this world was, where I don't even have words that match, you know. So it's very entertaining to me, because I'm like, I get lost in my universe occasionally, but I try really, really hard to write it all down. And my husband's like, if you're writing it down, you might as well, you know, put it up for people to use. So it's like, okay, that sounds fun. And so more and more will get added as, you know, time goes by. But right now I'm kind of focusing on book 2. So.
I don't know if you've read this or have read any kind of other books about people's writing processes or things like that. But like, I read Stephen King's On Writing, and he said that he doesn't know where a story's going to go until he gets there. Like, the kids' characters kind of lead him on the journey of where he's going to go. I don't know for you if it's more, you know, planned out, or if you've got. So
I've never read that Stephen King's book. I'm now going to have to go read it. Thank you, because I'm glad I'm not the only one. It makes me not feel quite so insane. Yeah, no, I come up with a character usually, and quite often what happens is I start writing. I have nothing at all, and I'll just start writing stuff down. And as the character moves forward, then I try to give myself a really loose outline of what direction to go. In the case of Leilani, I really started her as kind of a short story where I was, you know, playing with the idea. And as I went back and forth, I went, oh, wow, you know, she could be investigating a murder and, you know, just all these things. And then as I started writing stuff down, it was really funny. I didn't actually know how that book ended until I wrote it. Literally.
Oh, wow.
I had no clue. I was literally following her story going, where's she gonna go? You know, and then and then my editor's like, the book's too long. You got to cut 300 or 30,000 words. And I'm going,
Lord.
Okay. So then I had to go back through and figure out how to, you know, kind of, I did it in reverse, which is really not the way you should be doing an outline. But, you know, it worked out, I suppose. Well, so I think that's why it feels a little faster paced too.
We've talked to, I think, more than a few authors that seems to kind of be the way that it works for them.
Yeah, I can even get a basic outline, but still, I don't know how the end. Even book 2, I'm not 100% sure how the end's gonna go. So what happens?
As someone that started 5 and not finished them, like I can not knowing where something's gonna go. So, but if it's any consolation, he once said in a foreword for one of his Dark Tower books that he wrote, which he took like a decade in between the books, that he had a fan write him a letter saying they were terminally ill and they were going to be dying very soon and wanted to know how the series ended. And he had to write them back and said, I'm sorry, but I don't know yet. I haven't. So, you know.
That would be me. I have no idea. Hopefully that won't be the case with Leilani, but you know, each one I'm trying to make an individual story. I'm not trying to make it all one story. So like, you know, a story begins and ends, and then it's the next mission and then the next mission. And so each one should be mission based.
And you do feel a sense of resolution from reading the book. I mean, I was hoping there was going to be a sequel because I was liking where it was going to go, but it definitely felt like the story had ended and there was completion of what had happened. So that's good. You know?
Good.
But
that's very good.
So, I mean, we do work for a library, so I do have to ask some other library book related questions. What are you reading right now?
Me? I can honestly say nothing. I wish that weren't true. Right now I'm spending more time doing art projects and avoiding reading. I can honestly say that. So, you know, right now I will have, you know, 5 or 6 books on my open on my desk at a time, but I'm using them as reference material more than anything else. And because I'm writing, I tend to not read too much when I'm writing because I don't know where the story is going. I'm always afraid reading will affect the story. So I'm always, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally realize that your character went in the same vein as this other character that you were just reading about. So the last thing I read, though, I can't even remember what it was. It was about a year ago, and it was a really, really good book. But to be honest, we packed up and moved, and I'm not sure where it went when it came out of the boxes. It's in a bookshelf somewhere, and so I'm not sure what the book is. Yeah, I gotta find it. It's shame on me, but it was a really good book. If I can remember it, I'll post it on my website.
So. In that vein, like, what are some major works that have influenced you over the years? Like,
so my husband's so funny. He knew this question was coming. I've loved a lot of writers, a lot of sci-fi writers, quite a few fantasy writers. Your Dragonlance series and your Piers Anthony and stuff like that. But for my character concepts, I really have to say David Weber and Elizabeth Moon really shaped the way I focus on characters. The Paxenarian series, for example, was a really, really good series for me. I read it several times. And thank you. My husband is so sweet. So the book was called Black Company by Glenn Cook. But he's such a good husband. But the Elizabeth Moon and Paxenarian series, I really loved the way she developed the Paxenarian character. It had a lot of depth to the character. Same with the Honor Harrington series. And those characters just really kind of shaped the way I felt my characters, I wanted them to be. I wanted them to be super, super, super rich. I wanted to know exactly how the characters thought at all times. And if I could put them in any situation, no matter what it was, I wanted to know exactly what that character would be thinking and where they would go with it, and why. So the backstories are heavily built so that I can have this really sense of depth to my characters, and I got that from those two writers. I mean, very much so. I really enjoyed them.
Great. Actually, personally, going back to the role-playing thing, do you think that that's important to sort of be a fan of both sci-fi and fantasy to really get your books, or does that really matter? Do you not really?
To get my books? Well, I mean, you have to understand some basics. I try really hard to, not say that there's elves and trolls and dwarves, and even though there are dwarves and trolls, ironically, but I developed my own elven races. I developed my own kind of orcish type race called a Crodoc. And so I think understanding the basics of magic and a Harry Potter-esque style, interaction between multiple races in a somewhat magical universe where things kind of like float around and do things on their own, I think that's important. I don't necessarily, I'd like to think that people could get my books without that, but it might be a little harder if you didn't at least understand the basics of fantasy. As for the sci-fi aspect, I'm pretty sure I write that out well enough that most people will get it.
Yeah.
So
I enjoyed all of the little sort of technological things you put in there, like the genetic engineering that led to certain species, and like the heads-up sort of internal heads-up display stuff the characters had and things like that.
Yes.
So.
I want
really
that.
like that stuff. Yeah, don't we all?
Want that. Yeah, I want that.
Don't we all? I was really sad when Google's didn't quite make it there. I was like, oh, come on, where are my glasses? Give me my Google glasses.
Right.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But
self-repair item, where characters get injured and they immediately start repairing,
Yes.
Oh yeah, that would be good
Nanite
too.
repair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a really in-depth nanite system. And then in book 2 I get even more in detail with the Aether versions. And we really get into how the various, there's an Eldron, which is an eldritch electron for every electron, and how those work together, and how in Kaldane space they can actually cause explosions, and in Aether space they work just fine. And so but book 2 explains a lot more on the actual science of eldritch rather than just calling it magic. They really cover the science heavy sections.
So, and this is a sort of COVID 2020 related question. Is there anything that you've been watching, on TV or streaming movies, TV, that to sort of get through this year?
That I used to get through this year?
Yeah.
I gotta say it. Baby Yoda.
Mm.
Come on. Sorry, we were talking about that earlier. So I think that TV show's decent. My husband is in love with it.
Same.
It's not horrible. I think the first season the story was a little weak, but that's just me. But
it had Baby Yoda.
Exactly. In my household, the trick is for us no news. And absolutely under no circumstances any commercials. We have no commercials in my household. We have a TV stream that we put together that is, we bought the season, so it's all older stuff, very, very little newer stuff. Although I will admit, oh man, what is the name of that show? There's one show that my husband and I both really, really love on Netflix, but and it's a sci-fi show that really got us through. With the Altered Carbon. That was a big one for our household. Oh wow, we binge watched Altered Carbon. I mean, both seasons, just right through them. We really, really enjoyed that. But for us, the trick is just avoiding just avoiding all the news and the just. But it's kind of like my book, the world's hard enough as it is. I really don't want to be dragged down any further. So I avoid the news and I check it first thing in the morning, every morning, and then I stop. That's it. I don't care what happens the rest of the day, unless the world is shaking and my house is falling down around my ears. I don't care. But we watch things like That 70s Show and Nannies and Golden Girls and Hogan's Heroes, and there's even the occasional Gilligan's Island in there.
Oh, Gilligan.
Yeah. So we watch both black and white and color TV regularly in my household on a very regular basis, and we just have a comedy stream that just runs whenever we need TV.
Mm-hmm.
So
I recently learned, thanks to a coworker of mine, that they have Golden Girls like commemorative action figures.
Oh wow, that's fascinating.
So I was like, that's kind of interesting. So
that would explain how Robot Chicken was able to do Golden Girls.
that would explain it.
I thought they just made those. That's okay. All right then.
I might have to look that up.
Yeah,
that sounds interesting.
Check it out. It is hilarious.
So another question I had that was sort of library related very library related. Do you have any? Do you have a sort of a relationship with public libraries, or going to the library and growing up, or any memories of like going to a library?
Growing up, yes, very much so. I don't think we ever really went. I don't even remember if Greece had a library. I do remember spending a lot of time in the school libraries, at the very least in Alaska, because there's nothing else to do during the winter. Because we lived in Fairbanks and there's just nothing else to do. I remember, my teachers giving me books to read, and I remember, the summer reading programs, see how many books you can read and, win the stuffed
Mhm.
animal type thing. And all of that was through the library. I mean, my parents couldn't have afforded, 400 books, but, so I read like crazy growing up, and I spent a lot of time in libraries. And when my kids got a little bit older, when we were living in Monterey, I insisted that they both go to the library and learn how to use the Dewey Decimal System. I mean,
Oh,
like hardcore. I was like, no, you are
really hardcore.
going, and you are pulling out the little cards, and you are figuring out where your book is, because I am not, but because most of us, when we were younger, and especially in my case with a young adult with children, I couldn't necessarily, especially since I was getting divorced at the time, I couldn't necessarily afford to go buy them all the books that they wanted, but I still
Mhm.
wanted my kids to have access to books. My older child reads a lot. My younger child does not read much at all, and we did not figure out that it was because of her eyes until she was older. And
Mm.
so by that point, she doesn't like to read. But so that was my fail. But yeah, no, my older child does read quite a bit. And I love libraries. I like the smell of libraries. I know that sounds weird, but that's
Like,
why I have an entire wall in my house just filled with books, because my husband and I both believe in print versions of books.
Mhm.
We want as many print versions of books in this house as we can get.
Amen.
yeah, I only went the ebook route initially because I was running out of room for new
Yeah.
shelves.
My dad loves ebooks. I'm like, how do you read these things? And he goes, I spent my entire career, because my father was in the Air Force, I spent my entire career staring at a computer screen. What do I care? And I'm like,
Well,
okay, maybe, but no, I can't read a book on a digital format. I don't know why. I just can't. It has to be in physical. So if I can't buy it on physical, I generally don't buy it. So
One thing I keep thinking about with especially this year is that it's having a physical book is future proof because in case there's a time where you can't charge your device anymore, then you
yep,
have access to them. So
not only
yep,
that, they can't change it. They
exactly.
can't change the book that's in my hand.
Mhm.
that's right.
You
That's
know, they
right.
can they can change and edit on the fly all they want, those digital books, but you cannot change the book that's in my hand.
That's very
I
true.
like that. That's why I have a lot of history books on my wall too.
Yeah.
It's just,
So actually, that was another question I had. What other thing you mentioned before that you come from an education background? What other nonfiction things do you draw from a lot when you write?
psychology.
Hmm.
My graduate work's in psychology. My undergraduate work is in creative writing and criminal justice. I really
Wow,
badly
that's
wanted,
a combination.
yeah, I really badly wanted to be a police psychologist.
Mm.
And I was working my graduate degree for that. I was going to go be a clinician for police officers, and um, my husband got really, really sick, and that kind of fell through. So, my husband's working on his PhD. He's ABD for social psychology, so we're a pretty hardcore psychology household.
Sure.
But neither one of us are clinicians. Neither one of us are. And so, but the psychology and the social aspects and the cultural aspects and stuff like that, I have a lot of books on my walls for those things, because I really
Mhm.
want to make sure that each one of my characters, even if it's not a human character, I still want it to feel real, and the only thing a human reader is going to be able to associate with is a human. So
Mhm.
I try to change the elves and the dwarves a little bit towards how I feel that culture would adapt. But I still keep them close enough to human that my readers understand them clearly enough. So, but yeah, no, that's really important to me. I do a lot of sociology and psychology research with it as well.
I mean, that's mostly what I had as far as questions go.
Awesome.
You had some additional things you wanted to mention, or
We were talking about something earlier before we started, and I forgot what it was. Yeah, no, for me, this has been a really, really fun trip. My fantasy books that I wrote before this, because that's mostly what I wrote. This is my first sci-fi series, my first sci-fi novel. My fantasy books that I wrote before this, I feel they were good. I don't feel they were this good. I think this book for me felt more well-rounded, even though it's probably faster paced than I would have originally intended.
Mhm.
The 30,000 words really kind of sped it up faster than I
Yeah.
would have liked.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, next time around, maybe I'll be able to extend it out a little bit more and maybe have a few extra words in there, so that the story can be a little more well-rounded. But I'm also working a little harder at targeting what my publisher wants, so that this next book hopefully won't feel quite so fast. But I do like that people. I've had two different camps. Some people love how fast it is because they just like the feeling that they've just slid right through the story. And then some people have said it's just too fast. I didn't get to know the characters, and that's a completely legitimate argument. So we'll see how it goes as the story unfolds and continues forward. And then I have some ideas for some side stories with some side characters that were in there. So we'll see what
So
happens.
you mentioned already that you're working on book 2. Do you intend this to be a series, like a sort of interconnected series, or what's your thought about that?
So it's not. I don't want it to be a series, as in there are any cliffhangers. I'm trying really, really hard to avoid the whole cliffhanger concept, because
Right.
I don't want binge reading. I don't want people to feel like they have to wait until the end of the series to read the whole book to get the story. I don't want that to ever feel like that's the case. So my goal is to make each story self-contained. In this one, the mystery is presented and the mystery is solved, period. Are there some little side mysteries that she's going to continue following? Yeah, probably. Are there, because in all reality, there's a lot of little side stuff that happens there that people are like, wait, what just happened? But that's kind of the whole point. Those are just little tantalizing things on the side for, various stuff. And then, I really want to ensure that I start fleshing out the world as well. So, likely the second story will finish anything that's, residual that's left over from the first one. Shouldn't, because it's not really a cliffhanger, it just covers a little side portion of it. And it tells a lot more about the main character. You learn a lot more about the main character. And you learn a lot more about the universe. And then I've got some ideas for some side stuff that's happening during the back half of the book. But it literally will be, seeing what's going on from a completely different character's perspective in the same time frame. So it's not a serial thing. And that's my idea for book 3. I'm kind of going with a whole Hogan's Heroes type thing. But
I was going to ask you if you had thoughts about book 3 yet.
Yes, but it's a completely different character that's not in book 1 or 2 at all. And like I said, what I want to cover there is the back half of book 1, Aether Ones, the back half of Aether Ones. Basically, there's a lot of chaos happening in the book, without spoiling anything. There's a lot of chaos going on, and I want to cover some of that chaos so that people can see what's happening behind the scenes, because you follow this character straight through on her mystery, but I want people to be able to see the growth and adaptations and how some other people ended up interacting and changing and adjusting, because one of the characters in book 1 isn't even in book 2, and I want to be able to cover that, but I'm not going to write it from his perspective. I'm going to write it from somebody else's perspective, where he's still a secondary character. And who knows, but yeah, I've got at least 3 books like in mind that I'm kind of playing with, but none of them are going to require any other book to to understand the story and what's going on. The goal is each one of them is 100% standalone. You don't need the other ones to understand what's going on.
Do you
So.
know when we can expect book 2 to come out at this point?
That really kind of depends on book 1. So my hope is that it happens sooner rather than later. I'm hoping this time next year that it's out. But it really kind of depends on how book 1 does. If it does really well, I might work a little harder to get it out faster. If it kind of slowly ramps up, which is what I'm expecting it to do, then probably this time next year. Yeah,
Awesome.
Christmas next year, somewhere like that.
Awesome. So you heard it first here. Put it on your list for next Christmas.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
So we're getting to the place where we kind of need to start wrapping up.
Okay.
So first off, I want to say thank you for being here with us. It's been a pleasure. But also, we can't let you go without playing our game that is our traditional ending to each episode. It's called Yuck My Yum. And just in case any of you guys have never heard of this, it basically is the concept of what is something that you really love that everybody else hates, or something you really hate that everybody else loves.
Okay. So this is going to be great. So this is really kind of specific to people who role play. Just putting that out there, because there's something about role playing that I absolutely love that most people hate. And that is, I love making new characters. And I will make a new character every gaming session if the GM lets me. And it drives the other players nuts. Because for me, it's all about learning how the idea and the background that I have created interacts with the world that the game master is running for me. And for me, it's not about the mission that we're on. It's not about the loot. It's not about the story. For me, it's about how my character that I have developed interacts with the world. And so for me, I absolutely love making new characters. And I have just a folder on my computer with like probably close to 200 or 300 characters in it.
Wow.
That I just enjoy making characters. And to me, it's just how you develop out those skills and how you develop these backgrounds. And quite often these characters cause me to write entire short stories. In one case it was a 137,000 word short story. Yeah, it was really bad. My GM did not have nice words for me. He said the story was great, but he's like, okay, I don't want homework from my players.
Yeah.
But it was basically GM said, you have a year off. Tell me what you do. Really? All right. So that was, I don't think he's done that since. For me, it's the fun. It's the fun in telling the story, fun in learning how a new person acts, and it drives other people batty. They hate it.
So do you tend to use a lot of different races and backgrounds and things like that?
Oh yeah, I will pick stuff completely out of left field. I've done everything from robots, where I play the robot in a fantasy game, to grabbing a dog boy from Rifts and throwing it into something that I will pick the most obscure, crazy, insane thing that basically the harder it is to role play, the more likely I am to make it, because for me that's how you grow. You grow by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and figuring out how to make it through it. So
there you go. How about you, Brandon? I know you've answered this before, but I can't remember what you said.
Well, okay, there's a few things, but I'll out myself again. I don't hate it, but I'm not a big Harry Potter fan. I mean, I'm
Oh, that's
not
right.
I'm not like a Pottermore,
Yeah.
I get it. I understand why it's popular. I respect, what she's done, where it is in the world, like the how it fits in the zeitgeist of of humanity. But it's just not something that I go to is like my go-to read. And I feel like whenever I tell somebody that, I'm like a heretic.
So
Burned at
so
the stake, but-
so here's a question. Do you not like the characters or do you not like the world?
Well, I just it's not that I don't like it. I just don't. I didn't get that visceral feeling of like, oh, this is something I'm really invested in when I read it. Maybe it's the world. I don't know.
Because I wasn't a huge fan of the Harry Potter books. I will be completely honest. It probably didn't help that I saw the movies like 9,000 times.
No.
Remember, I had kids in that age group.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Same. Mhm.
So that probably does not help the story. But the Phantasmic Beasts ones, I love. I like freakishly love them. I love.
Really?
I love her animals, I absolutely love the different races she developed and how they interact and how they interact with the worlds and stuff like that. I love that. Of course, I'm a dog trainer by as a background profession, so that could have something to do with it, but I
Little
just
bit.
really 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 enjoy the Phantasmical Beast stuff, but I wasn't a huge fan of the story.
Well, see, the thing for me was like, I've always gravitated more toward like the Jim Butcher, Harry Dresden wizard stuff.
Oh yeah, I
'Cause
love
to
the
me,
Dresden.
yeah, I love the dialogue and the humor of that book because it reminds me of me and how I sort of view things and kind of make comments about things in my own sense of humor. And so there's so many nerdy jokes that he makes that I don't think that a lot of people would get. Just movie references and stuff. In the middle of the most inappropriate moment in the book, he'll just quip about something that's a John Carpenter movie reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds more like you're just not as interested in the children's version of the reading.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, you like the more adult comedy type stuff, which could be why I like the Phantasmical Beast stuff a little better because I have the same problem with the Harry Potter stuff. It's just a little too. But I mean, she did not write that originally for adults; it was for young teens. But and I'm the same way. I like the darker stuff. I like the comedy, and I don't feel like there's much comedy in her stuff at all, if at all, except for in the Phantasmical Beast stuff.
And in full disclosure, I only got to book 3 before I stopped reading. So I've heard that the later books are a lot more, I guess adult friendly than the earlier ones. But I couldn't get past book 3.
I've only ever seen the movies, so you're good. I think I read book 1 and 2, maybe book 3, but mostly it was just the movies. But yeah, so you're good. It's okay. If it makes you feel any better, I think I kind of agree with you.
Well, I also made the mistake of thinking that I needed to be a well-rounded librarian. I would give Twilight a try just so I could know.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
And that
wow.
I only got book 1, and it was like that was a disaster. I had to stop after it. I couldn't read it. I couldn't go on. It was just that.
I couldn't even watch the.
No.
My kids liked
The
that.
movie
I
is
couldn't
better
even be in the
that
room.
way. The movie is better, and the movie's not.
Is
good.
it really?
I can't even imagine that. I don't know where to go from that.
The book is just no.
I got that one. No, I'm good.
That is quite the sacrifice you made, Brandon. Because
Yeah,
I couldn't. I
kind of
can't.
insane.
Mhm.
I can't. And same. I had kids straight up Harry Potter demographic. I did read all the books, and I really, really liked them at the time. But what I'm finding as time goes on is that I don't think they hold up that well.
Yeah. I think
in
as I get
some-
older, I just get a little more critical about stories in general.
Fair. But they're, Brandon, what you heard, I mean, it's adult friendly. They get darker.
Okay.
If that's more adult friendly, I mean, okay.
I see.
They get darker, but they don't get funnier.
Yeah.
at
No,
all.
they don't get
Oh
funny.
my
No, you're
God.
right. There's not
There's
just
no
a
comedy in
ton
it.
of humor. Yeah. That's not very sort of, juvenile. But again, like you said, she wrote it
For kids, yeah.
For kids.
Well, and
yeah.
in the Phantasmical Beast stuff, the comedy isn't necessarily in the dialogue. in the animals. I mean, that's
The
that
yeah.
it's not in the dialogue. It's not in, and I'm not even sure those are books. I think those are just 100% screenplays.
Yeah.
So there is a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book that's like, because she did, I think, kind of a little bit of what you're talking about, maybe wanting to do with these kind of little side things,
Yeah, exactly.
that
Mhm.
were related to the world, but not
Yeah, they're not
necessary,
stories.
not stories. Right. And
Carnival
uh,
Road too that has all that stuff.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But yeah, so it's basically it's a textbook from
Yeah.
that's referenced in the show. But yeah, but no, the
And it's
animals
like
are
textbook,
amazing.
so that's
And that's all on the director.
yeah.
That's all on the director and the animators. That has nothing to do with the writers.
Yeah. Well, again, Wendy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. This
And
was fun.
we're so excited for your book and for your next book. So again, next Christmas list, everybody. So
I hope so.
oh.
This is way to put the pressure on. All right, so I start
Good thought.
writing again tomorrow. Yeah, we're
Go,
good.
Wendy, go.
right.
Thanks again. Thanks, Brandon, for being here with us tonight. I just want to remind everyone, you can go to our website at dallaslibrary.org and look for #What's Next. If you're interested in having one of our personal librarians give you suggestions on anything, books, music, movies, whatever you're interested in, probably role-playing games as well. So just check that out, and we will see you next time.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Happy to do it.
All right.
Yeah, this was actually kind of